Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a look at something I know you've been wanting to explore, and it's a big one: how we humans use what we know to predict what's going to happen, and how that shapes what we do. We're calling this predictive knowledge and forethought for this deep dive, and to help me unpack this, we've got some really fascinating excerpts from a psychology text all about social learning theory.
Oh, yeah. This is great stuff.
It is.
Chapter 5 especially gets into the really interesting stuff, the kind of stuff you're interested in, about what really makes us tick.
It does. It does. So why don't we just jump right in? And I think a good place to start would be to define what predictive knowledge actually is.
It's funny. When you think about it, we humans, we don't just react randomly to the world, right?
Right.
We're always picking up on cues, trying to figure out what they mean, and using that info to figure out what might happen next.
Yeah.
We're always trying to be one step ahead.
Yeah, so it's not just like a knee-jerk reaction to things.
Right.
We're actually kind of building a model of the world in our heads and using that model to make decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that model, it's built on all sorts of things.
Right.
All kinds of cues from our environment, social signals like we were talking about, even symbols, abstract concepts.
Yeah.
You can think of it like a web, right?
Yeah.
A web of all these ideas and experiences we've had, and we use that web to understand how things work.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So this predictive power, though, isn't just about like how we act, right?
Right.
Because even in the text, it talks about how this can actually impact our physical health.
It can.
Like how we think and how we predict things can actually have a physical manifestation in our bodies.
It can. Yeah. There's more and more evidence that our psychological state can actually directly affect our physical health. For example, if you're under a lot of stress for a long time, that can actually weaken your immune system.
Wow.
And that can make you more susceptible to getting sick.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful example of the mind-body connection, right?
It is.
And it's almost like our thoughts can create a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in that way, almost.
It's a complex relationship, but there's definitely something to that. Yeah.
Wow.
Another example is learned drug tolerance,
Okay.
where basically your body learns to expect the effects of a drug based on the environment you're in or the routine that you're doing while you're taking the drug.
So, like, if someone's taking a particular medication every day in the same room,
Exactly.
my body's like, oh, okay, here it comes.
Exactly. The system starts to prepare for it in advance.
Yeah.
And this can have really serious, even life or death consequences.
Wow.
So think about a heroin overdose. If someone always uses in the same place, their body develops a tolerance to a certain dose.
Okay, yeah.
But if they take that same dose in a new place, without those cues, without those environmental cues that their body is used to, the effects can be way stronger.
Oh.
And sometimes even fatal.
Wow. So that's a real kind of stark example, I think, of how these predictions, even if we're not even aware we're making them, they can have a huge impact on our lives.
They can.
So how do we even learn these predictive relationships in the first place?
That's a great question.
Yeah, is it just like stuff happening close together in time?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, because it turns out it's not just about simple association.
Okay.
Research has shown that what really matters is what's called the predictive value of a cue. So how reliably does that cue predict the outcome?
Okay, so it's not just that it happens together. It's that one predicts the other in a reliable way.
Right. It's not just about proximity in time. It's about the predictive power of that cue.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and how much attention we pay to that cue is really important, too.
Good.
We learn to pay attention to cues that have been really accurate in the past.
Oh, okay, so we're not just like passively taking in all this information. We're actually judging it, evaluating it based on our past experiences.
Exactly. And sometimes we even learn to ignore cues that seem like they should be informative, but they haven't been reliable in the past.
So it's almost like we're testing and refining our model of the world as we go.
You got it.
Yeah.
And our past experiences can even make us really slow to learn when a cue that was unreliable before suddenly becomes a good predictor.
Oh, interesting.
There's this fascinating study where participants had to try to figure out if they were going to get a painful shock.
Oh, wow.
Based on different cues. And one of those cues was like seeing a fearful facial expression.
Okay, interesting. Because faces, we know, are really powerful social cues.
Yeah.
So Did people learn to avoid the shock when they saw that fearful face?
Not necessarily. It turns out they pretty much ignored those fearful expressions as a predictor of pain.
Oh, wow.
Because in their past experience, a fearful expression usually meant something bad was going to happen, but it wasn't necessarily pain.
Oh, interesting.
So it took them a lot longer to learn this new association.
So our past experiences, the assumptions that we've built up about the world, can actually make us less adaptable in some ways.
They can.
That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is, but when you think about it, we're trying to make sense of this super complicated world.
Right.
So we rely on our past experiences to create these mental shortcuts.
Yeah.
And that's efficient most of the time,
Okay.
but sometimes it leads us astray.
Yeah, it's like we're walking around with this mental map of the world, and sometimes that map needs updating.
Right?
But updating it can be tricky, especially when it comes to beliefs and assumptions we've held for a long time.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that our mental map isn't just shaped by our direct experiences.
Okay.
We can also learn to predict things based on symbols and abstract concepts.
Okay.
This is what psychologists call symbolic affective learning.
So that's like how a certain word or an image can trigger a strong emotional response in us,
Exactly.
even if we haven't personally experienced anything directly related to it.
Exactly. The research on this is amazing. They did these studies where they had people listen to insulting comments, right? But the comments were delivered in a really neutral tone of voice.
Okay.
Over time, though, just hearing that neutral tone became enough to trigger an emotional response in people,
Yeah.
just because it had been paired with those negative words.
So our emotional responses are being shaped by all these indirect influences.
Yes.
Not just our own experiences, but what we see and hear and learn from other people.
Exactly. It really highlights the power of what's called vicarious learning.
Vicarious learning.
Yeah, so we can develop these anticipatory responses just by observing other people's emotional reactions.
Oh, interesting. So like if someone we trust reacts fearfully to something,
Yes.
we might start to be afraid of it too.
Exactly. Even if we've never had a negative experience with it ourselves.
That's powerful.
Think about how kids pick up on their parents' fear.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And this kind of social learning is especially potent when it comes to things like phobias.
It makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like our emotional responses are way more complex than we think.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just simple hardwired reactions.
Right.
They're being shaped by this whole web of personal experiences, social influences, these abstract concepts.
Absolutely. And that complexity becomes even more apparent when we look at how fear drives self-protective behavior.
Okay.
For a long time, the dominant theory was that fear acts like a drive state, right? It pushes us to do things to protect ourselves, to avoid danger.
Okay.
But a lot of research has actually challenged that theory.
Really? So it's not as straightforward as I see a threat, I feel fear, and then I run away.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes those defensive actions happen before we even consciously feel the fear.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So if fear isn't always driving those actions, what is?
Well, one perspective is that both fear and that defensive behavior are both products of us feeling like we can't control the situation. It's not the fear itself that's motivating us, but the belief that we don't have the ability to cope.
So it's more about that feeling of vulnerability, of powerlessness.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense. Like if we feel like we can handle something, we're less likely to be afraid, even if it's objectively dangerous.
Exactly. And that's where forethought comes in. We don't always need to be in a heightened emotional state to guide our actions.
Okay.
Just thinking about potential consequences, that anticipatory thought can be enough to motivate us to act.
It's like remembering to take out the trash before it starts to smell, right?
Exactly.
It's not really driven by fear, but by knowing what will happen if we don't.
Yes. And this can get reinforced by what's called subjective confirmation. Even if our actions aren't necessary, the fact that the negative outcome doesn't happen, well, that makes us think our actions were effective.
No, that's like the old joke about the guy who snaps his fingers every few minutes to ward off lions, right?
Yes.
And because no lions attack him, it proves to him that the ritual works, even though it's completely irrational.
That's a perfect example. It really shows how our minds can sometimes create these self-fulfilling prophecies, whether they're true or not.
This is so fascinating. It really makes our understanding of fear a lot more complicated.
It does.
So if it's not this one simple thing, how do we even define it?
That's a great question. Lang's tripartite view of fear, I think, is a really helpful way to think about it.
Okay.
He basically says that fear isn't just one thing, it's a combination of three components.
Okay.
First, there's what we think and say about fear. That's the verbal component.
Okay.
Then there's how our bodies react. That's the physiological component.
Okay.
And then there's how we behave. That's the motor component.
Okay.
And these components, they don't always line up perfectly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you could have like a racing heart without actually feeling scared?
Exactly.
Or you could avoid something without consciously thinking you're afraid of it.
That's right. And this actually allows for a lot of flexibility in how we express fear, which is really adaptive, you know? It means we're not always at the mercy of those immediate instinctual reactions.
But we have at least some control over how we respond to fear.
Yes. We can choose to face a situation even if we feel some anxiety.
Okay.
We can take precautions without being totally paralyzed by fear.
It's really empowering when you think about it that way.
It is.
But if fear can be expressed in so many different ways, what's the core element that really makes it fear and not something else?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I think for theoretical and empirical purposes, we should really understand fear as an emotion primarily indexed by autonomic arousal.
Okay, so it's that physiological response.
Right.
The
Right.
racing heart, the sweaty palms, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the most consistent and measurable indicator of fear.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like the most primal, universal aspect of it. So we've come a long way from that simple view of fear as a single emotion to a much more nuanced understanding of it as this really intricate interplay of thoughts, physical sensations, and behaviors.
Right. And it's complex.
Yeah. Which brings us to another fascinating question. How do our thoughts actually influence what we feel?
Ah,
How do they shape our emotional experience?
a great question, and one that psychologists have been grappling with for a long time.
Right.
Schachter's two-factor theory of emotion, I think, offers a really interesting perspective. He suggests that the physical arousal we experience is actually pretty similar across different emotions.
Oh, interesting.
What really determines how we label and experience that arousal is how we interpret what's happening, our cognitive appraisal of the situation.
So if I'm physically agitated, my interpretation of the context will determine whether I experience that agitation as fear or excitement or anger or something else entirely.
Exactly. It's like our minds are assigning meaning to those raw physical sensations.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But is there really no limit to how much we can mislabel our arousal?
Well, that's where things get a bit debated. Some research suggests that unexplained arousal, when we don't have a clear reason for why we're feeling that way, tends to lead to negative feelings.
Okay.
And it's not always easy to just reframe it as something positive.
So it's not like we can just talk ourselves out of feeling anxious.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, this isn't anxiety, this is excitement.
Exactly. It's hard to fool our bodies.
Right.
So while our thoughts definitely play a role, it's not like we have complete control over our emotions.
That makes sense. We can't just think our way out of every feeling.
Right. But there is this interesting phenomenon where residual arousal from one experience can actually merge with subsequent emotional experiences, potentially intensifying our reactions.
Interesting.
Like, imagine you've just had a close call while driving, really scary.
Oh, yeah.
You might be more likely to overreact to some minor annoyance later on just because you're still carrying that residual arousal from that earlier experience.
It's like our emotions have a kind of momentum.
They do.
Yeah. They build on each other. So even though we might not have total control over how we feel, we can at least influence our emotional responses
We can.
by paying attention to how we interpret situations, managing our stress, and even just being aware of that residual arousal.
Exactly. And all of this underscores the idea that thinking, feeling, and acting are all intricately interwoven. We're not just passively reacting to the world. We're shaping our experience through how we think about it and the choices that we make.
It's getting pretty philosophical now, isn't it?
It is.
It makes you think about free will and agency,
Yeah.
To what extent are we really in control of our thoughts, feelings, and actions?
Exactly. It's a big question. And this brings us back to that social cognitive perspective we've been talking about that really emphasizes that complex interplay
Right.
between thought, feeling, and action.
Yeah, it's a dynamic process.
It is.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, we have. There's so much more to explore.
There is. There
Yeah.
is.
We were just talking about how our thoughts shape our feelings.
Yeah.
And a really good example of that is when we learn to be afraid of something.
Okay.
And there's this interesting debate about whether fears that we develop through symbols like words or stories are easier to change than fears that come from, actually experiencing something scary.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It seems like it would be easier to get over a fear that's based on something someone told you versus something that you actually went through yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the source material suggests that it might be a bit more complicated than that.
Oh, okay.
They say that sometimes really persistent feels might actually come from these really stubborn, uncontrollable thoughts
Okay.
about the thing that happened, the painful event.
So it's not just that we don't understand, it's that these thoughts are so powerful, they kind of take over.
Exactly. It's like even if we logically know that a fear is irrational, those thoughts can still pop into our heads and trigger a really strong emotional response.
So we can't just reason our way out of it.
Right. Think about someone who has a phobia of dogs, for example. Even if they understand that most dogs are friendly,
Right.
that thought of a dog attack might just keep coming back to them, regardless of whether there's any actual danger present.
So it's not just about logic and reason.
Right.
Our emotions are also being shaped by these underlying thought patterns that can be really hard to control.
They can.
That's got to be really frustrating for people.
It can be. And it highlights how important it is to look at what's going on in our minds when we experience fear, not just the feeling itself.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we need a more nuanced model, a model that acknowledges that some aspects of fear might be easier to change through thought, while others might need those repeated real-world experiences to really shift.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It seems like we're always trying to balance those two parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
the rational and the emotional.
Right.
And this tension comes up again when we look at Zajong's non-cognitive view of emotional reactions. Now, this fear is often presented as being the opposite of those cognitive theories we were talking about.
Right.
But Zajong's position is actually a little bit more nuanced.
Okay.
He actually says there are times when our thoughts and feelings are independent, but there are also times when they're intertwined.
So it's not a black and white situation.
Right.
Sometimes emotions happen fast, without much thought, but other times our thoughts are definitely shaping how we feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Zajong really emphasized how speedy and unavoidable emotions can be.
Right.
But as the text points out, thoughts can be just as fast and unavoidable.
Like when someone tells you not to think about a pink elephant,
Right.
you can't help but picture it.
Exactly. And just like we can change our minds about things, we can also change our emotional reactions.
Okay.
Even deep-seated phobias can be overcome if people have the right experiences.
That's encouraging to hear.
It is.
Yeah.
It really challenges that old view that emotions are just these pure instincts, totally beyond our control. Now, while there's a lot to appreciate in Zhejiang's perspective, there is one area where the sources kind of disagree with him.
Okay.
And that's this idea of biological preparedness.
Biological preparedness.
Yeah, it's this idea that, certain animals are kind of hardwired to learn certain fears more easily than others
Okay.
because of their evolutionary history.
Okay.
But whether that really applies to humans is still up for debate.
So, like, the idea that we're all born afraid of snakes
Yeah.
might be oversimplifying things a bit.
Exactly. The sources argue that we might learn certain fears more easily because of how things tend to happen together in our environment and also because of our own past experiences. They call this experiential preparedness.
Okay. So it's not just our genes. It's also about how we learn to associate things based on what we actually encounter in the world.
Exactly. Think about taste aversions, for example.
Okay.
Animals, they can develop aversions to new tastes if they get sick afterward.
Right. Yeah.
But they don't really develop those same aversions to other bad things, like electric shocks.
Okay.
It's a really specific kind of learning,
Right.
really shaped by what's important for their survival.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense for animals, but I mean, I know people who have, like, had a bad experience with a food they've loved for years, and now they can't even look at it.
Exactly.
It's like one bad experience was all it took. It seems like our thoughts and interpretations play a bigger role there.
They do. If someone gets sick after eating a familiar food, even if they've eaten it a million times before, that one negative experience can create a lasting aversion.
It's like our minds create this super strong link
Yeah.
between that taste and that feeling of being sick,
Exactly.
even overriding all those past positive experiences.
Exactly. And the sources point out that this preparedness explanation doesn't really fully explain human phobias either.
Okay.
Some phobias, like the fear of mushrooms, are pretty rare, even though some mushrooms are deadly.
Yeah, that's true.
But then other phobias, like the fear of snakes, are way more common, even though statistically, other things are way more likely to actually hurt us.
So our fears don't always line up with the actual dangers in the world.
Right.
Okay.
It's not just about what our ancestors were afraid of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something else is going on. Exactly. And they bring up Freud's famous case study of little Hans, the boy who was afraid of horses.
Oh, yeah, little Hans,
To
yeah.
kind of illustrate this.
I remember reading about that. Didn't Freud see that as an example of, like, the Oedipus complex or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the sources have a different interpretation.
Yeah.
They argue that Hans's fear actually developed because of a whole bunch of different experiences that made him really sensitive to horses.
Okay.
He saw horses being beaten.
Oh, wow.
He was warned about them being dangerous.
Okay.
A friend of his got hurt while they were playing horses.
Okay.
And then, this is a big one, he saw a horse-drawn bus get into a really bad accident.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So it wasn't just this, innate fear of horses. It was a learned response to these specific experiences.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a fear of any large animal.
Right.
It was horses specifically because of what he'd seen and heard.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he wasn't just afraid of horses. He was also afraid of heavily loaded vehicles, probably because of that bus accident.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this kind of fear generalization really points to a learning process.
Yeah.
It's not just an innate predisposition.
Wow. It's fascinating how our understanding of things can change as we question those old assumptions.
It is.
So if it's not just biological preparedness,
Right.
what does explain why we're more afraid of certain things than others?
The sources suggest that it really comes down to the psychological properties of those things.
Okay.
Things that we perceive as unpredictable, things that we feel are uncontrollable, and things that could potentially harm us.
So again, it comes back to that sense of control or lack of control. If we feel confident that we can handle something, we're less likely to be afraid of it, even if it is dangerous.
That's right. And this brings us right back to perceived self-efficacy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That belief in our ability to manage difficult situations. It's such a huge factor in shaping how we respond to the world around us.
It makes you think about how we use this predictive knowledge in everyday life.
It does.
Not just when it comes to fear, but just in general.
Right.
It's like we're always making these calculations, even subconsciously,
Right.
about the potential consequences of our actions.
Yeah.
And then adjusting our behavior accordingly.
Exactly. The sources really highlight three main ways that we gain this predictive knowledge.
Okay.
Through our own direct experiences, through symbols like language, and then through watching what other people do.
So we learn from what we do ourselves, what we're told, and what we see.
Precisely.
Okay.
And of those three, learning by watching others, what we call modeling, that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can learn so much about how to act just by seeing what works for other people and what doesn't.
Especially when it comes to complex social stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's way easier to learn those unwritten rules of social situations by watching other people than by, constantly making those awkward mistakes ourselves.
Exactly. And a bunch of things influence how effective this modeling is.
Sure.
Like the characteristics of the person we're watching,
Yeah.
our own characteristics as observers, and most importantly, whether that behavior actually leads to good outcomes for the person doing it.
So we're more likely to copy people who we see as competent and successful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're less likely to imitate behaviors that we see lead to negative consequences,
Exactly.
even if those behaviors are being done by people we admire.
Right. We're not just blindly copying, we're actually evaluating whether those behaviors work or not.
Right. It's like we're constantly analyzing the data.
We are. And this leads us to another really fascinating aspect of predictive knowledge: rule learning.
Rule learning. Okay, what's that?
So it's basically the process of figuring out these general rules of action
Okay.
based on our experiences. We learn to recognize those patterns
Yeah.
and cues that signal different outcomes. And then we develop these rules for how to act in those situations.
So it's like building a mental playbook for how to handle different situations.
Exactly. If this happens, then do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And this rule learning, it involves a few steps.
Okay.
Paying attention to the right cues, figuring out how they relate to each other, remembering what worked and what didn't, and then updating our rules as we get more information.
It sounds like a lot of mental work.
It is, and you might be wondering, how do we actually learn these rules?
Yeah.
Is it mostly through trial and error?
Yeah, do we just have to, stumble around and figure it out on our own?
Well, while some rule learning definitely happens through direct experience, a lot of it comes from being told what to do
Oh, okay.
and from observing other people We learn from instructions and examples.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine trying to figure out all the rules of life just by trial and error?
Yeah, that would be a disaster. Okay, so let's get even more into the specifics, like the actual cognitive processes happening here.
Okay.
How do we even decide which cues are worth paying attention
All
to?
right.
And then how do we know if they're actually good predictors of what's going to happen?
Great questions.
It seems like there's so much going on in our brains that we're not even aware of.
There is. So when it comes to picking out cues, a few things influence us.
Okay.
Some things just naturally grab our attention. They're what we call inherently salient.
Okay.
Others become important because we've been primed to look for them,
Okay.
or because they've been important in our past experiences.
So even if a cue isn't actually relevant,
Yeah,
we might still pay attention to it because of our past experiences.
exactly. And we also rely on our existing knowledge and beliefs to guide our attention.
Okay.
It's like we're filtering the world through this lens of our own unique understanding.
So it sounds like making accurate predictions is a lot harder than it seems.
It is. And once we've kind of zeroed in on a potential predictor, we have to test whether it actually works.
Okay.
And we do this by comparing what we predicted would happen to what actually happened.
Right. And then adjusting our understanding based on that.
Exactly.
It's like we're running these mini experiments in our heads all the time.
We are.
We're like little scientists,
Yeah.
gathering data, testing theories.
Exactly. And how easily we can learn these rules, it really depends on how complex those rules are.
Okay.
Simple linear rules are way easier to master than these complex ones that involve multiple factors and probabilities.
So like if I do X, then Y will happen is easier to grasp
Exactly.
than a rule that's like, well, if A and B happen but C doesn't, then there's a 50% chance of D.
Exactly. And then to make things even more challenging, a lot of the things that we're trying to predict are, by their very nature, indefinite.
Indefinite. What does that mean?
Well, take social behavior, for example. Okay. Yeah.
What's considered polite in one context might be totally rude in another.
Right.
It all depends on who's involved and the unspoken rules of the situation.
It's like there's this whole extra layer of complexity
There is.
when it comes to social stuff.
Yeah.
That makes it really hard to come up with clear-cut rules. No wonder social situations can be so anxiety-provoking.
They can be. We're constantly trying to read between the lines, interpret these subtle cues, and figure out how our actions are going to be perceived by other people.
Yeah.
It's a lot of mental gymnastics.
It is. And then on top of that, we have to deal with all those cognitive biases and limitations we talked about earlier.
Right.
It seems like, even with the best intentions, we're still prone to making mistakes in judgment.
We are. Our brains are amazing, but they're not perfect.
Right.
And these errors can have really big consequences, especially when it comes to misreading threats.
So we can misinterpret situations as being dangerous
We can.
when they're not, or fail to recognize real threats.
That's a scary thought.
It can be. And the sources highlight 3 common ways that this happens.
Okay.
Through what they call coincidental association, inappropriate generalization, and perceived self-inefficacy.
Okay, let's break those down.
Okay.
Starting with coincidental association. What does that mean?
So it's basically when we mistakenly think that some irrelevant event has predictive value just because it happened to occur at the same time as something bad.
Like the example we talked about before.
Yes.
With the woman who developed a phobia of bow ties.
Exactly.
Just because she happened to be cheated on by a man wearing one.
Exactly. The bow tie itself had nothing to do with the infidelity, but because those two things happened together, her mind created a link between them.
It's amazing how our brains can do that.
It is.
Create those associations, even when they're based on completely random events.
They can, yeah. And these mistaken associations can become even more ingrained through what's called self-produced reality. So if someone believes, for example, that bow ties are a sign of untrustworthiness, right? They might start acting defensively around men wearing bow ties.
Right, yeah.
Which might actually provoke negative reactions from those men that then confirm their initial bias.
It's like a vicious cycle. So what about inappropriate generalization?
Okay, so that's when we kind of overextend our fear responses from a traumatic experience
Okay.
to other things that share some similarity to the original trauma,
Okay.
even if those things are totally harmless.
Like the classic example of little Albert,
Exactly.
who became afraid of not just the white rat,
Right.
but also, like, Other furry things after being conditioned to fear the rat?
Exactly. His fear generalized based on that physical similarity.
Yeah.
But it can also happen based on semantic similarity.
Okay.
Like someone who had a traumatic experience in a hospital, for example, developing a fear of anything related to medicine or healthcare.
It's like our brains are trying to protect us by casting a wider net, even if it means we end up being afraid of stuff we don't need to be afraid of.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the final mechanism, the perceived self-inefficacy.
Right.
That's all about how our belief in our ability to cope with a situation shapes how threatening we see that situation.
Exactly. If we don't think we can handle something, we're way more likely to perceive it as dangerous
Okay.
and avoid it altogether.
So our sense of confidence or lack of confidence can actually change how threatening the world feels to us.
Exactly. And this perceived inefficacy can lead to a lot of anxiety and this feeling of always being vulnerable. It's like seeing the world through this lens of fear and doubt, constantly looking for potential threats.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, isn't it?
It
Like if
is.
you believe you can't handle something, you're less likely to even try, and then that just reinforces the belief that you're incapable.
Exactly. And these misjudgments aren't just limited to how we perceive threats. They can also affect our decision making and our actions in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
So how do these misjudgments show up in our everyday lives?
That's a great question.
Like beyond just making us overly fearful, how do they impact our choices?
Well, sometimes we make bad decisions simply because we don't use all of the relevant information that's available to us,
Okay.
either because we don't notice it or because we misinterpret it.
So either we're missing clues or we're misreading the clues we do have.
Exactly. And this is especially likely to happen when we're stressed out, which can really make it harder to think clearly.
Yeah, that makes sense. When we're under pressure, we're more likely to make mistakes.
Exactly. We're also susceptible to what the sources call misjudgment by assumed likeness.
Misjudgment by assumed likeness.
Yeah. This is when we give too much weight to perceived similarities when we're making decisions,
Okay.
even if those similarities are actually superficial or misleading.
So it's like judging a book by its cover.
Exactly.
We see something familiar, and we assume it's going to be the same as before, even if that's not always the case.
Exactly. We might ignore what are called base rates, the actual statistical likelihood of something happening,
Okay, yeah.
in favor of judgments that are based on stereotypes or, just our own personal anecdotes.
So we might overestimate our chances of winning the lottery
Exactly.
because we know someone who won, even though the odds are incredibly small.
Exactly. Or we might underestimate the risks of something just because we haven't personally experienced any negative consequences.
Yeah. It's like our gut feelings can be so misleading sometimes.
They can. And this tendency to go with our gut instead of actually looking at the data can lead us astray in all sorts of areas of life.
It can. Okay. And then we also have to contend with all those cognitive biases we talked about earlier,
Right.
like confirmation bias, where we only pay attention to information that confirms what we already believe, even if those beliefs are wrong.
Exactly. And we also tend to overestimate how much we actually know,
Okay.
especially in areas where we're not really experts.
So we might think we're smarter than we actually are,
We might.
which can make us overconfident and lead to some bad choices.
It can. It's like we're walking around with this blind spot,
Yeah.
totally unaware of the limits of our own knowledge.
And all of these cognitive biases can kind of team up to create a distorted view of reality,
They can.
which then leads to poor judgment and us taking actions that we end up regretting.
Exactly.
It's like we're navigating the world of a faulty map.
You got it. And speaking of faulty maps, all of this kind of reminds me of that concept of the illusion of control.
Oh, the illusion of control.
That idea that we often believe we have more control over things than we actually do.
It's so human, though, right?
It is.
It's a way more comforting to believe that we're the masters of our own destiny than to admit how much is actually outside our control.
Absolutely. And this illusion tends to be even stronger in people who aren't depressed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they tend to have a more optimistic outlook and are more likely to see themselves as agents of change.
So a healthy dose of self-belief can be helpful.
It can.
But too much can lead to a distorted view of reality. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between confidence and realism.
Right. And this illusion is further fueled by the way our memory works.
It is.
We tend to remember our successes more vividly than our failures.
Right.
And we're always drawn to information that confirms our belief in our own effectiveness.
Exactly. It's like we're constantly curating our own highlight reel,
Yeah,
focusing on the wins and downplaying the losses.
right. And while that's good for our self-esteem, it can also lead to some unrealistic expectations
It can.
and make it harder to learn from our mistakes.
It can. So it's important to be honest with ourselves about our limitations
Yeah.
and acknowledge when things really are outside our control.
Right. Which brings us full circle, I think, to the importance of perceived self-efficacy.
Yes.
We've talked about how it influences our fears, but how does it play out more broadly?
Well, I think as we've seen, self-efficacy really shapes our emotions, our motivations, and ultimately our actions.
Okay.
When we believe in our ability to handle challenging situations, we're less likely to get bogged down by fear and anxiety.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, we're more likely to set ambitious goals, persevere when things get tough, and ultimately achieve more.
So it's not just about having the skills.
Right.
It's also about believing that you can use those skills effectively.
Exactly. It's that confidence that really makes the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. And this belief in ourselves can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay.
You know, when we believe we can succeed, we're more likely to actually put in the effort
Right.
and to keep going, even when we face obstacles.
So even if we don't feel super confident at first,
Right.
taking on those challenges and experiencing success, even in small ways, can help to build that belief over time.
Exactly. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, a lack of self-belief can really hold us back from reaching our full potential. It can become this self-limiting belief.
Wow. It's a powerful message.
It is.
It suggests that our beliefs about ourselves are just as important as any external factors.
They are. And this is exactly why cultivating a strong sense of self-efficacy is so essential
Yeah.
for our personal growth and our well-being.
Right.
It's about recognizing our strengths,
Okay.
acknowledging our limitations,
Right.
and believing in our ability to learn and grow.
This has been such a mind-blowing exploration of predictive knowledge.
It has.
It feels like every step of the way, we keep bumping up against this incredible complexity
Yeah,
of the human mind.
it is.
How our thoughts and our emotions and our experiences are all tangled up together, shaping how we see the world and how we act.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. And while the complexity can feel kind of overwhelming at times, it also, I don't know, it speaks to that incredible adaptability
It does.
and resilience of the human spirit.
It does.
You know, we're always learning.
Yeah.
We're always evolving. We're always finding new ways to navigate those challenges of life.
We are.
Like we've been given this glimpse behind the curtain of our own minds.
Yeah.
You know, we can see the gears turning. We're starting to understand the patterns.
It is.
And while that can be a little daunting, it's also incredibly liberating.
I agree. It allows us to become more conscious creators of our own experience. We can shape our reality,
Yeah.
through the choices we make and the beliefs that we choose to cultivate.
We've reached the end of our deep dive into predictive knowledge.
We have.
But, the journey of self-discovery, that continues.
It does.
I encourage you, our listener, to keep thinking about these ideas.
Mm.
Think about how your beliefs and expectations shape your perceptions of the world.
Yeah.
What steps can you take to challenge those unhelpful biases
Right.
and cultivate a more adaptive and empowering mindset?
Exactly.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It is. And remember, knowledge is power. By understanding how our minds work, we can use that power to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep challenging assumptions, and keep exploring that fascinating world within and around you.
So we've been having this really interesting conversation about, predictive knowledge and how our brains work. But it seems like even with the best intentions, we don't always get things right.
That's true.
Our judgments aren't always perfect. So what can we actually do to improve that accuracy?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
I mean, it can feel kind of overwhelming when you think about all these biases we've been talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Like they're always lurking in the background, waiting to trip us up.
Right. So what can we do? What are some strategies?
Well, the text actually offers some helpful advice.
Okay.
One of the biggest things is just being aware of those biases.
Okay.
Recognizing that we all have that tendency to favor information that confirms what we already believe,
Right.
even if it's not actually true. So challenging those assumptions,
Exactly.
even the ones that feel really ingrained, really comfortable,
Exactly.
and actively seeking out different perspectives.
Yes.
Even the ones that make us a little uncomfortable.
Especially those.
Okay, yeah,
It's about getting outside of our own echo chamber.
right. And being careful about relying too much on, like, personal anecdotes or stereotypes.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Those stories can be really compelling, but they don't always reflect the bigger picture.
Right, so stepping back and looking at the statistics,
Yes.
the actual likelihood of something happening
Exactly.
can help give us a more realistic view.
It can.
It's like, my personal experience might tell me one thing, but the data tells a completely different story.
Exactly. And being open to changing our minds when we encounter new evidence,
Okay.
not clinging to those old assumptions just because they're familiar.
Yeah, that's hard, though. Letting go of beliefs we've held for a long time.
It is. But sometimes it's necessary if we want to make more accurate predictions.
Right, right. Okay, this is all sounding very rational and level-headed.
Yeah,
You know?
it is a process.
Yeah. But what about the emotional side of things?
Oh, that's important too.
Yeah, how do we deal with, like, the fear and the uncertainty?
Right.
That can come up when we're trying to predict things.
Yeah.
Especially when there's some risk involved.
Well, that's where building that strong sense of self-efficacy comes in.
Okay.
Remember, when we believe in our ability to handle tough situations, we're less likely to get totally paralyzed by fear.
Yeah, yeah.
That belief in ourselves can make a world of difference.
Okay, but what if you just don't feel confident?
Yeah.
What if, your past experiences have kind of made you doubt your abilities?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to just flip a switch and suddenly believe in yourself.
It is. It definitely takes time and effort.
Yeah.
And that's where focusing on what are called mastery experiences can be really helpful.
Okay, mastery experience.
Yeah, it's about starting small, setting achievable goals that allow you to experience success, even if it's in a really limited way.
So breaking those big, scary challenges down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly.
Okay.
Each small victory helps to build that I can do this feeling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It does. And don't be afraid to look to others for support and guidance.
Okay.
Observing people who have successfully navigated similar challenges can be incredibly inspiring.
So, like, finding mentors, role models.
Yes.
Even just friends who share similar goals.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
We don't have to figure everything out all on our own. Having that social support can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that setbacks are inevitable.
They are.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone faces challenges.
Absolutely.
So don't let those failures define you.
Right.
Instead, see them as opportunities for learning and growth.
Exactly.
It's about reframing those failures as valuable data points.
Yeah.
Asking yourself, okay, what can I learn from this experience?
Exactly.
How can I adjust my approach going forward?
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of self-talk.
Self-talk. Okay.
Yeah. The way we talk to ourselves about our experiences can have a huge impact on our emotional responses and our motivation.
Yeah, that negative self-criticism can be brutal.
It can be.
So replacing those self-defeating thoughts
Yes.
with more positive, more empowering statements can actually help us perform better.
It can.
It's like giving ourselves a pep talk,
Exactly. And all of this really ties back to that core idea.
Okay.
Our thoughts, feelings, and actions are interconnected.
Yeah.
By changing how we think about those challenges, we can change how we feel about them and ultimately change how we respond to them.
This has been such a mind-expanding deep dive. I feel like we've covered so much ground,
We have.
from those basic mechanics of how our brains make predictions to that complex dance between our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. So what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that while our minds are capable of some pretty incredible things, predicting, adapting, learning, we're also prone to these quirks,
Right.
these biases.
Yeah.
But by becoming aware of them, we can start to minimize their impact
Okay.
and cultivate this more accurate and ultimately more empowering view of ourselves.
Yeah. It's like we've been given this behind-the-scenes tour of our own minds.
Yeah.
We're seeing the gears turning, understanding the patterns.
Right.
And while that can be a little intimidating, it's also incredibly liberating.
I agree. It gives us the power to be more conscious creators of our own experience.
Yeah.
We can shape our reality through the choices we make, the beliefs we choose to hold.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We have.
But this is just the beginning, really.
It is.
Listener, I encourage you to keep reflecting on these ideas. Think about how your beliefs and expectations shape your perceptions. What steps can you take to challenge those unhelpful biases?
Yeah.
And build that more adaptive and empowering mindset. It's a journey, not a destination.
It is. And remember, knowledge is power. By understanding how our minds work, we can use that power to create a more fulfilling, more meaningful life.
Could agree more. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep challenging assumptions, and keep exploring that amazing world within and around you.